Basantar in 1971, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal refused to abandon his burning tank rather, when he was ordered to do that. His last words, "No sir, I won't abandon my tank. I have my last gun still working." He was martyred before he shot down one more tank of Pakistan, and he was awarded with Param Vir Chakra, and he became the youngest recipient of Param Vir Chakra. We have with us Mr. Mukesh Khetarpal, his younger brother. Sir,
right.
Well, what kind of a human being was he? Because you are the one who has lived for the longest period with him.
Our father was a brigadier in the Corps of Engineers, and he actually used to decide what profession his children will go into. My elder brother, being the more intelligent between the two of us,
Right.
was chosen to become an engineer and join the IIT. And actually, my father had wished that I would join the NDA and Arun would become the engineer. And Arun had qualified for IIT. So my father was very happy.
Right.
Because that was his desire, that his eldest son should become the engineer, and what better than a prestigious institute like the IIT. 10 days later, however, the NDA result came out. And of course, Arun had qualified for the NDA. Now, Arun's heart had always been to join the armed forces, right from childhood. So my brother was now, wanting to tell his father that it was not IIT that he wanted to join, but that he wanted to go to the NDA. But he didn't have the courage to face his father and tell him directly. So he told my mother. He told my mother कि ममा पापा से बात करो कि मेरे को IIT नहीं, मुझे NDA जाना है. So my mother was, kind of very upset with him. कि क्या बात कर रहे हो? You don't know what you're talking about. IIT is such a prestigious institute. You go to the IIT. So she said, "Nani, Mama, please, please, please." So finally, my mother picked up the courage to tell my father कि अरुण कह रहा है कि IIT नहीं जाएगा और इसको NDA जाना है. So my father was very upset. He says, क्या बात कर रहे हो? He doesn't know what he's talking.
Right.
Not everyone gets into IIT. So NDA तो मुकेश जाएगा. Arun would say, "No, Papa, please, I want to join the NDA." And every day, same thing. And every day my father said, "No. IIT is for you and NDA is for Mukesh."
Did you feel bad about it at that time, because you were considered, he was considered more intelligent than you?
When he was, actually, I was very envious of my brother, I must tell you. See, what happened was that, I would get all the hand-me-downs, because Arun was 1 year older.
Right.
तो उसके कपड़े छोटे हो जाए तो मेरे पास, उसकी साइकिल जो है वो बड़ा हो गया, उसको दूसरी साइकिल, मेरे को पुरानी साइकिल. So I would get all the second-hand things, and I always felt that Arun was the favorite son because of this. I mean, it would go to the extent that there were 2 glasses of milk lying on the dining table. I'd say, "I want that glass," because I felt that was special. And Arun was, of course, very, very understanding, and he was a real elder brother to me, and he would kind of this thing. So anyway, the story ended where finally my father relented, and Arun knew what he wanted to do. He joined the NDA. And my father looked at me, and now he told me, "You have to become the engineer." So that's how, fate turned the other way around, and he ended up going to the NDA.
And how did he get into Poona Horse, the regiment that he was there in 1971?
Well, Poona Horse, you must know, is a very highly decorated regiment of the Indian Armed Forces. In fact, the most decorated regiment of the Armed Forces. It's a 180-year-old regiment, and you got to be special to get in. Of course, Arun did well in NDA and in the IMA, and so he was privileged that he had the opportunity to go and join the Poona Horse.
And you were telling me a story of raising a toast for himself, saying that he will be the soldier to achieve.
There is a way of dining in the new joinees of Poona Horse. So at that dining in ceremony for Arun, they have a system of raising a toast to the heroic deeds done by Poona Horse. So Arun, of course, raised the toast in the name of Colonel Khetarpal. Colonel Khetarpal, you must know, in 1965, he was a commanding officer of Poona Horse and he died in battle. And he was the first Param Vir Chakra winner of Poona Horse. Right. So Arun raised a toast to Colonel Khetarpal, the first Param Vir Chakra of Poona Horse. And everyone said, yeah. But then everyone thought it's over. But Arun said, no, but I want to raise a second toast. So Arun actually picked up his glass and everyone was wondering, what is this young man going to say now? So he picked up that glass and he says, now I raise a toast to the second Param Vir Chakra winner of Poona Horse, second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal. Can you imagine? But that was perhaps that inner urge in Arun to wanting to, be and do something, that he raised the second toast, in his own name, and people, of course, laughed it off. Says, oh, of course, young man, you should do that. So that's how it happened.
But that is what he achieved later on. You were telling a story where he had gone out. There was a day when he had gone out of the academy and then probably to meet his girlfriend.
Yeah, actually, he was friendly with a lady, and that lady lived in Delhi.
You knew about it?
I came to know later. Because just before the passing out parade, what happened was that it was a weekend, and so Arun decided to jump over the walls of IMA and head to Delhi, where his lady that he knew, he was wanting to meet her. So there was a shared taxi system, that used to work from Dehradun to Delhi. So each taxi, would, as the seats would fill in, then the taxi would begin to move. So Arun was early, and so he took a seat. And unfortunately for Arun, what happened was the last seat that was occupied was by his, battalion commander, who was in charge of the single company that Arun was working in. And he looked around at Arun and he says, going somewhere, Arun? So, of course, Arun was knew that he was going to be in trouble. He says, oh, don't worry, come back and we'll have a chat. And actually that chat kind of, since it was a breach in discipline, and that's how Arun lost that opportunity, I'm told, to lead that parade on disciplinary grounds, and which I'm sure Arun, would have regretted later on in his life. And as a consequence, he couldn't lead the parade because of that.
Apart from being a brave soldier who made the supreme sacrifice, he was an empathetic human being. There is a story on that also with you.
Yes, that's true. Arun was very, very, considerate to people who were perhaps in more need than what he was. So every 3-4 months, my father would end up visiting us, and then typically he would try and spoil us. So one such visit, he took us to the market and he bought us some very nice pullovers, soft Kashmir pullovers. Since we'd bought new pullovers, we both put on those sweaters and we went to school, and it was a cold winter day. We came back in the evening and my brother's sweater was not with him. So my mother looked at him and says that, Arun, where is that sweater that Papa bought you yesterday? He says, oh, Mama, I've forgotten it in school. The entire outcome of this story unraveled itself to me when I was studying in IIT. Just outside our IIT campus, there was a dhaba, and we used to go and step out and have some coffee and parathas there every evening, or sometimes in the evening. We finished our, parathas, and I went up to the counter to pay my share of the bill. And this young man turned around and told me that, "Aap Arun Khetarpal ke bhai hain?" I said, "हाँ." And he said, "मैं आपसे पैसे नहीं लूँगा." He asked me another question. He says, क्या आप कभी शिलोंग में रहते थे? So I said, हाँ, मैं रहता था. क्या आप कभी सेंट एडमंड स्कूल में पढ़ते थे? मैंने कहा हाँ. Now this was getting very curious because here was this young man and he seemed to know a lot. So I said, ये सब आपको कैसे पता है? He says, मैं आपके भाई साहब को जानता हूँ. So I was completely perplexed in saying that here is this dhaba owner, in Delhi, and what he's talking about happened, a good 20, 30 years earlier. So he says, so I said, "Aap kaise jante hain?" He says, "Mere father wahan pe kaam karte the." He was a peon. And he says, "मुझे याद है कि एक दिन बहुत ठंड पड़ रही थी, मुझे बुखार था, मैं रो रहा था, और मेरे पास मतलब गर्म कपड़ा पहनने को नहीं था। एंड देन एक लड़का आया, उसने मेरी तरफ देखा और उसने अपने बदन से ये स्वेटर, बहुत बढ़िया सा स्वेटर, मुलायम था, बहुत गर्म था, उसने उतार के मुझे दे दिया और मैंने वो स्वेटर पहना। So, I mean, it tells you something about Arun, because Arun never said a word of this to my mother, despite, my mother being very angry with him. And here was a story that I was uncovering some 22 years later, of this young man who I met completely out of the blue. So that was the kind of person that Arun was. He was very, very considerate to, people who were needier than him, and he would go out of his way to help them.
The Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal is one of the people, one of the soldiers, because of whom this doctrine of Pakistan failed, that they can barter something in the east for west.
So what West Pakistan decided was that let's attack India on the western front, so that, and that part of the front which connects India with Kashmir, and Kashmir has always been location which Pakistan has had its eye on. Where the battle happened in the western front was a place called, there's a small river, and Shakargarh is that area, and it's known as the Battle of Basantar. It's only about 20 kilometers from the road, that arterial road that connects India to Kashmir.
The NH-44?
The NH-44. So I think what the Pakistanis had decided was that if they could cut through and somehow blockade that road, then they would be able to isolate Kashmir, and as a consequence, that later on they would perhaps get a chance to barter what they'd been able to, if they were able to somehow get some kind of control over the Kashmir territory with West Pakistan, with East Pakistan, and that would become the bargaining point for them to do that. So it was critical for them, and that's why they attacked us.
Right.
So the battle that happened for Arun, therefore, just happened to blunt the Pakistani attack. The Indian armed forces actually stepped across the river and went into West Pakistan, and there is where that battle took place, because they had grouped a huge regiment full of armored tanks, the 13 Lancers as is known, and they were perhaps preparing themselves to come here, and we kind of preempted them by going to that side of the border and blunting their intention of coming across and taking control of this particular road.
So what had exactly happened there, sir? They had crossed a field which was laid with mines?
No, that is right. See, when they crossed that river, and across the river they laid mines, so that to prevent any soldiers or armor to cross and get into Pakistan territory. And the Indian army had laid a bridge, and they'd set their infantry across to capture that bridgehead so that they could protect it, and whereby allowing the Indian armor and troops to move across that bridge. Now, unfortunately, the Indian armor, which was the infantry which was on the other side, was heavily attacked by Pakistani armor. Brigadier Hoshiyar Singh, Major Hoshiyar Singh then, was also part of that battle. He got the Param Vir Chakra, and later on I met him when he was a brigadier. But his infantry troops were attacked by Pakistani armor, and therefore the Indian armor was called in to kind of go across quickly and blunt the attack of the Pakistani 13 Lancers, and thereby prevent them from actually walking over and and many of the infantry people would have got killed had that not happened. So that's the first purpose of getting across. They crossed that minefield. Of course, they had some casualties because one of the kind of senior Naib Subedars, who was, Arun was kind of put under his care so that he would be able to guide Arun, because Arun had just passed out from NDA only 6 months before he was given charge of going across. Unfortunately, he died in that battle, and therefore Arun was left on his own.
So what had happened exactly on 15th and 16th, if you can narrate story of Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal?
So what I'm told is that on 15th they cross, and then on, on 16th what happened was that early in the morning at 8:30 in the morning, they were attacked by heavy Pakistani armor. 13 Lancers was...
that is when they had already crossed.
They'd crossed. They crossed the minefield. Actually, they crossed the minefield. They were taking time to cross the minefield. Colonel Hood said, don't wait for the minefield to get cleared. You guys drive across. If any tank gets hit, doesn't matter. The other tank will take over from the right-hand side. But luckily for them, none of the tanks got damaged, and they were able to, cross the minefield without any casualty. So when they crossed the minefield, at that point in time, of course, the infantry, they were able to protect, but the Pakistani armor attacked. And in that attack, the Indian, there were 9 tanks, I'm told, which took on the Pakistani armor, and the Pakistani armor had to withdraw. But in the process, what happened was that, of course, the Indian tanks were also kind of damaged, and the Pakistanis, however, went back and they regrouped, and they did a major counterattack with a huge regiment full of, close to, I'm told, about 25 tanks, and which surrounded these 9 tanks, and they had a fierce battle. Now, in that battle, what happened was that the Indian armor, of course, put on a brave fight, and I'm told it is the biggest battle that has ever happened after Second World War, for the armored corps. One by one, they kind of fought. Unfortunately, the 2 other, troop commanders of Poona Horse, one of them was injured, and as a result, he had to fall back. And the second tank, which was commanded by Captain Malhotra, his gun developed some mechanical failure. As a result, it was only Arun's tank that was, in fighting form, and he was supported by his few other tanks that were there. They took on the Pakistani armor one by one. They knocked them all off, and eventually, of course, in between then, after, I'm told, his tank, was responsible for knocking off some 7 or 8 Pakistani tanks. In between, Arun's tank got hit. It was on fire, and when it was on fire, then Captain Malhotra, saw the fire, and he told Arun, bail out of the tank because your tank is on fire. Because if a tank is on fire, then it can be fairly dangerous. It can explode. It's got shells and, fuel inside. But Arun said, no, sir, my gun is still firing. I'll show thee so-and-so. And whereupon, I'm told, he switched off the intercom. Otherwise, it would have been tantamount to disobedience of an order. And he kept firing. And in the meantime, Arun also lost his 2 other tanks. And finally, it was only the enemy commander's tank. Major Nasser was the enemy commander, and my brother's tank that were face to face. They were within 200 yards of each other. They fired. Unfortunately, the shell fired by Major Nasser's tank came through the porthole, and my brother died, at that point. My Major Nasser's tank was also hit, but he was fortunate. He was able to bail out, and he lived, thereafter.
The dream of Param Vir Chakra that he had seen while raising a toast, the second toast that you were talking about, he realized this dream, but with that supreme sacrifice, of course.
Arun wasn't really, I don't think he was aspiring for that Param Vir Chakra. It's just that, he was doing his duty. he was doing his duty at that moment in time. He did what was right.
Right.
And so, of course, he paid for that with his life. But that was the unfortunate thing.
Reaction from your father at that point of time?
And we had a transistor radio. We knew that battle on 16th, a fierce tank battle had occurred. My father was in that same area in 1965. Of course, radio Ceylon signals weren't so good. It'd come and go. We were glued onto this thing. But on 16th, on 17th morning, ceasefire was declared. So we all actually breathed a sigh of relief, saying that, thank God. We actually came to know on the 19th, 3 days later, and that too by a telegram that was delivered to us at 8 o'clock in the morning. The Dakia came, he pressed the bell, and my mother went outside, and she saw that, and of course she screamed, and she kind of, fainted there. We heard her scream, we ran outside, and here we saw in her hand that telegram which said that Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal killed in action. We're a very small family. My father was really looking up to the career of my brother. But in reality, even today as I talk to you, it's painful.
It is.
This pain my parents carried to their death. I mean, can you imagine a 21-year-old young man going out, from a family? So there was a lot of pain.
And this happened almost on the day when war had ended.
One day before. No, so now when we look back, we get and later on, my mother was awarded that medal on 26 January.
The Param Vir Chakra.
The Param Vir Chakra. But at that point in time, we were so numb with what had happened. The Param Vir Chakra was a secondary thing to us.
Of course.
But of course, in all these years, as we sit back here and talk, after all, this happened in 1971, it's almost 55 years ago. You and I are sitting here and talking. There's a movie that's been made. Ikkis is releasing tomorrow. So actually we are really humbled that how after 55 years, people still relate to what Arun did.
So after many years, your father had been to Pakistan and he got to meet the officer who had fired that last shot on Arun's tank.
See, actually we belong to Sargodha. My father, we've been refugees. My father originally hails from Sargodha. And so he flew, to Lahore. Then the family that he was staying with, Brigadier Nasir, he turned around and he told my father, कि sir, मेरे को आपसे कुछ कहना है. So my father said, हाँ बेटा बताओ क्या कहना है. He said, नहीं sir, थोड़ा बाहर बगीचे में टहलते हैं. He took my father outside and he told my father that, sir, I'm from 13 Lancers. Now 13 Lancers, the story is that when partition happened, one part of Poona Horse that went to Pakistan got rebadged as 13 Lancers. So my father said, 13 Lancers, my son is also Poona Horse. So the chap turned around and says, I know your son. He said, how do you know my son? He says, because in 1971, I was from 13 Lancers and your brother was, your son was in Poona Horse, and we had a fierce tank battle, and of course your son, stopped us from, winning that battle and going into India. But I must share with you, I was that enemy commander, and I was leading it, and eventually it was only my tank and his tank, and we both were facing each other. The shot that I fired from my tank killed your son.
Must have been difficult, sir.
No, let me tell you, what happened was my father came back, and he was very quiet. I picked him up from the airport. I said, Papa, aap, thak gaye honge, rest kar lijiye. He was unusually quiet. Then 4 days later, there was a book release by General Cardozo, also Mahavir Chakra winner, and he'd written a chapter on Arun, on the Param Vir Chakra winners. And he said, it's happening in Ashok Hotel. Sir, please आइए, आपके हाथ से book release होगी. It'll be very nice. My father went to the book release in Ashoka Hotel, and there the press was there, and this story he never told us, but he told the press. I came to know it from when I read it in India today. I asked my father कि पापा आपने बताया क्यों नहीं? He said, बेटा मैं आपको क्या बताता? So that is the twist of fate and how it happened. I think there is an Arun in every youngster, no matter what he's doing. If you believe in something, go and do it. Even if you have to pay with your life to do it. And that is the message that I think, Arun's story is and should be for anyone who watches this movie, which will release tomorrow. And I hope you get a chance to see it.
Thank you, sir. It's been over 5 decades that Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal made this supreme sacrifice for this country. But no matter how many times the story is told, it will remain new and it will remain forever in the hearts and minds of every Indian citizen.